We're a little late for Thanksgiving, so maybe we should just call this review Leftovers instead. But as they say in the tagline, there will be no leftovers. Either way, so many of you guys asked us to review Eli Roth's new horror movie. We knew we had to catch up with it. So we're going to dig into it now. Alonzo, what is Thanksgiving about?
This is weird. We're all tagged, and our names are at the table. But why us?
Hey, we had to wait like more than a decade after getting the trailer in Grindhouse to finally get this movie. So, you know, I think people could wait a week for the review. So this is the movie that Eli Roth has long promised us. It was one of the mock trailers in Grindhouse, and it is a Thanksgiving set slasher movie. In the town of Plymouth, Massachusetts. We open on a Thanksgiving night where a local big box store is doing an early Black Friday. There's a stampede of consumers. Several people are killed, and we cut to a year later, and the store is planning to do it all over again. But this time, there's a serial killer who is out to take care of whom he thinks or she thinks are the principal people involved with the previous year's retail massacre. And so we follow a group of high school students who are trying to figure out who the killer is before they themselves wind up on the guest list. If you loved the kills in the Thanksgiving trailer, they are recreated here along with some new ones. And this is a lot of fun. I mean, it is a down and dirty slasher movie, but clever, and they figure out interesting ways to incorporate Thanksgiving into it, which is not necessarily a holiday that loans itself to this kind of thing. And it's got a great cast, starting with Patrick Dempsey as the local lawman, and an all too brief appearance from the great Gina Gershon.
I really love the casting here because they're not famous people for the most part. Like Addison Rae is one of the teenagers, and she's very famous as like an influencer. But like for the most part, the teenagers feel like teenagers. They feel like real people. It's not famous person stunt casting. I think that goes a long way to giving this the kind of authenticity that he is striving for here, because this really feels like, in a lot of ways, a throwback to the kind of 80s horror movies that he loves.
Sure.
You know, that was a huge influence on him growing up. And you can tell just the way he stages things and just where he puts his characters and who his characters are. Like, a lot of them are just assholes. And there's a whole thing with a cheerleader and a football player that is so tense and so well staged and feels like such a throwback to the kinds of things that you would see in like raunchy, cheap 80s horror movies that I was just really impressed with how he said that. Totally. He loves the kind of thing. I know Sleepaway Camp is kind of controversial now in retrospect, but like Sleepaway Camp was influential on Eli Roth. And so like that kind of like grimy 80s horror is a thing he does here. But then also, if you like the quote unquote torture porn side of Eli Roth, that is here too, I think, in some of the later sequences as far as what happens to some of his characters. I'm not a fan of that part of his filmography, the hostels and all that. But like, if that's what you like, that is also here. That first stampede at the big box store is so well staged and so well paced. And he like covers every square inch of that parking lot and that doorway and that entryway to the store. You really feel like you are among them. The tension, he like really expertly ratchets up that tension. So like, you know what's coming, you know how horrific that's going to be, but still you're like, oh God, how bad can this be? And just some gnarly stuff happens to people in those first opening minutes. Also, this movie is so New England. Oh my God, just the accents are so strong. I got to look up who is the guy who plays McCaddy, the guy, the older guy who still hangs around the high school. And every year he has the McCaddy Patty.
The McCaddy Patty.
I got to look that up because he reminds me of.
I thought it was Martin Starr for a long time, but he's not.
It does look like him. It is not. I got to look this up for him, but he's his name. Anyway, he reminds me of like Damone in Fast Times at Ridgemont High. Like such a real and eccentric person. I totally believed him. And he has one line where these underage kids are trying to get into his annual party, and he goes, "Go back to Methuen." Like, it's a very specific little town outside of Boston. So this movie is, if you are from New England, Eli Roth, who is from there, I think he's from Newton. He gets it right. Anyway, so I had a really
Patrick
good time.
Dempsey is
I
a
did not know
Mainer.
who the killer was.
I didn't either, but I'm done with
Yes.
that way. Patrick Dempsey's from Maine and knows the accent. I also the thing that's great about this is that it is, even though it has a very 80s slasher flavor, it is set now, and they use cell phones in a really interesting way, because I think a lot of times in horror movies they feel like they have to, like, oh, the battery's got to die, or there has to be no service. Like they go out of their way to take cell phones off the board, because that would ruin the suspense. And here they actually use them in a really clever way, where they're getting tagged on Instagram, and that's how they know they're being stalked, and how the killer, leads people to the wrong place by using cell phone stuff. Like they bake it in a way that I thought was really smart, and sort of like understanding that, if you're going to set a movie in the modern day, you have to incorporate modern day technology, especially the way the teenagers use it, and they do that really smartly, in a smart way, I think.
I thought that was really clever too, but then like a lot of the technology is very rough hewn, like including the oven. There's an oven that is a key centerpiece of all this. And then when the killer is wearing a John Carver mask the whole time, which also feels like a very 80s thing to me, for the killer to be wearing a mask the whole time. And then this person sets the mask down on top of the oven, and part of it gets like half of it gets like kind of singed, like melted and singed.
Yeah,
totally. And that adds a whole other layer of just horror to this person's demeanor. If you are being chased by a serial killer through the streets of your quiet hometown, maybe you need a lightsaber to fight them off. I am delighted to tell you about the new company that we're working with, End Sabers. And they make these really cool, really high tech, really elaborate, and like hefty, sturdy lightsabers. If you want a Cal Kestis lightsaber, for example, which is what Nick was interested in, or Darth Vader or Yoda or whatever, like each one has a different handle, kind of like if you want your specific Harry Potter wand, you can get your very specific lightsaber handle and details on it, but then it lights up with different colors for like Mace Windu or Leia or whoever, or Luke or Kylo, and it says stuff. Nick had so much fun playing around with all the different sound effects and just the different lighting and all that. The one thing he said was that it's a little challenging to assemble, is the only thing. So once you get past that, it's a blast. So we've got a deal with them. Our code is breakfast all day. They have all kinds of cool deals going on right now for the holidays. And so if you have a Star Wars fan in your life who might really enjoy this, it's a really nice gift. So End Sabers, check them out. We've got a discount with them down below. Yes, I also enjoyed how very rough hewn a lot of the weaponry was here, because it is set in like historic New England settings, and it's a lot of like muskets, utensils for cooking.
Yes.
Yes, there's Chekhov's musket.
And cooking utensils are appropriate for a Thanksgiving set horror movie.
You use the high school setting really well. You use the town really well. It dips into like, fake Americana, and there's the idea of, enjoying this history, and, maybe we shouldn't.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was fun. So
they're not the first people to like commit to have murder tied into Thanksgiving. So yes, they address that too.
Yes. What's your number?
I'll say a 7.5. I think it's solidly entertaining. I'm not a super horror guy, but like the kills are the kind where I was like laughing and screaming and looking through my fingers, which is the perfect combo. And a friend of mine went and saw it like opening weekend at the Vista, which just reopened here. That Quentin Tarantino just refurbished this theater, and they were screening it, and it was like packed house, and everybody was just responding very vocally to everything and really having fun with it. So yeah, if you can catch it in a theater while it's still there, it's a fun movie to see with a crowd.
I definitely laughed and screamed and like shouted, "Oh my God," to myself. So I'll say like an 8. This does what it does really well. And I had a good time. So Thanksgiving is still in the theaters. Go get a bite.